What are some things that you are afraid of? We all have our fears. Let's admit it. Let's get it out there. But some of the things that we are afraid of are real, or at least they're a real possibility. And let's face it, there's some things that are just an illusion. They're just out there in the mist and the vapor. And sometimes after the fact, we look back, why was I worried about that thing? Because it never even came to pass and was not likely to. I'll take you to a little verse of scripture that's found in Proverbs 26 and verse 13, where a man has an imaginary fear that affects his life. And we'll talk about how we can deal with our fears and overcome them in our lives. It says in verse 13, the lazy man says, there's a lion in the road. A fierce lion is in the streets. Now, I understand he's talking about a man who's trying to avoid some work, trying to avoid being involved in some activities. And he uses this probably as a lame excuse. There's a lion in the streets. I can't go out and do anything. There's this fierce lion walking down the road. Now, I want to talk about how we tame the lions in our lives, and sometimes it's not leverage to get us out of work, but they are real. We really see lions out there. And you think about it, most of the things we think about, a lion in the street, probably, could it happen? I can't absolutely verify, totally disprove a negative. There are no lions in the street, but the chances are you and I are not going to bump into a real lion today. But there are things out there that scare us, and sometimes they're real, sometimes they're imagined. But how do we deal with them? How do we deal with those things? And where do they come from? Where do those kind of thoughts creep in and attach themselves like Velcro in the inside of our hearts? How does that take place? Well, there's sort of a little progression. Oftentimes it starts with trauma, some scary experience, oftentimes in our childhood, not exclusively, but sometimes those fears imprint on us, those traumas imprint on us from long years ago, and it just sort of stays attached. But the trauma from the outside then imprints itself internally in us into our emotional makeup. In other words, we have a stimuli that takes us back to that trauma. We don't want to experience that again, so our emotions say, avoid this at all costs. Worry about this. Protect yourself. And sometimes that leads us into some bad places in our life. It can lead us to depression. It can lead us to hostility. It can lead to trying so to defend ourselves, protect ourselves. We don't allow anyone into our lives. So it affects our relationships. So trauma imprints on our emotions, which produces fear in the real world, in the real time, in the present. So how do we counter that? What do we do? How do we tame the lions in our lives? Well, remember we talked about there are some fears that are real and some are imagined. Probably the most are imagined. But we deal with them in the same way. We tame the lions that we perceive out there in the streets in the same way. And let me take you to a verse of Scripture, a couple verses of Scripture that's going to help us fill out this concept of this fears, these lions that haunt our minds and the inner recesses of our soul. Let me take you to a verse of Scripture that's going to help us with that. I want to take you to 1 Peter chapter 5 and verse 8, where it talks about a real threat that's in our world today. And it says, be sober, Peter writes, be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. It's interesting that Peter puts Satan in this picture, this illustration, this metaphor of a lion who's a predator ready to pounce, because he does want to destroy. So there are real things in our world, starting with Satan himself and all the things he's affected in this fallen world, and all the people that deal with the trauma of experiencing sin that he has tempted the world into. And it leads to, that trauma leads to an imprinted or emotional reaction, which then leads to fear in the present tense. So just understand, there are some things that are real, and it's the product of this fallen world we live in. So don't be surprised that you have some things that you fear. But the question is, how do we deal with those fears? Let me take you back to the Scriptures one more time. Let me take you to 1 John 4:4. You are of God, little children, and have overcome them, because he who is in you is greater than he who is in the world. Think about this. Satan is pictured as this predatory, destructive, vicious lion seeking to pounce. So what do we have? We have someone who is greater. If you're one of God's children, if you're a follower of Christ, if you put your faith in him, you have him. As it says in this verse, he who is in you. Paul in his letter to the Galatians says, Christ in you, the hope of glory. He comes in and lives within us. He lives within us and shares our life. He empowers us. We have God's presence with us at all times. So what do we do with this great lion, all these threats, real or imagined, trauma, emotions, fear, all these things that come upon us, real or imagined, mostly imagined. But Satan is certainly real, and some things we need to watch out for. We need to be vigilant and sober. That's what Peter said. Be on the lookout, be aware, be thoughtful. But here's the great news. The one who is in us is stronger than that lion that is outside of us. We have a bigger, stronger God than all the things that we face. So how do we deal with the trauma that produces this emotional imprint, that produces fear in real time? We replace that emotion, not with more trauma, but with the soothing calm that God is with us. We let this fact that He is with us come in and settle down our emotions, to calm our hearts, to reset our thinking, and to remember this, that the one who is in us is greater than that one who's in the world, greater than even that roaring lion. Let me take you one more verse of Scripture. It's really going to nail this down for us and lead us home. Take a look at this. This is Revelation 5 and verse 5. And John in this vision sees and records this. But one of the elders said to me, "Do not weep. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, has prevailed to open the scroll and to loose its 7 seals." I just want to look at that designation of Christ there, and there's so much prophecy and backstory you can get into what the scroll is about and what it's going to lead to in the kingdom. Don't have time to get into that today. We've covered that in other teaching and other videos. But think about this with me for just a moment. He is the Lion of Judah. Judah is the tribe from which Jesus descended, the tribe of Israel. So he is the right one, the one who was prophesied, the one who was predicted, the one who was empowered to rule. And he is the Lion. And oftentimes in the ancient Near East, lions were used to depict the king, the monarch. He was put in a lion-like a persona. And sometimes we even call a lion, the king of the jungle. It's the superior beast, the top of the food chain predator in that natural order. So Jesus is at the top of every chain. He is the Lion of Judah. Maybe we could say it this way. When we worry about the lions in the streets and the lions on the road, real or imagined, when we realize that Satan is a roaring lion, he wants to devour and destroy us, and when we replace that trauma-induced emotion which leads to fear with the calmness of knowing that Christ is with us and He is greater than He is in the world, we're reminded that the Lion of Judah is stronger than the lion that roams this world today. And the Lion of Judah is stronger than any lion that we could imagine, anything that we could foresee, anything that we could ever encounter. We can rest in Him. Remember this today. Here's how you tame the lions in your life. You remember that Jesus is with you. He is stronger than all, and He can help you in any situation. Lean on Him. Let that calm your emotions, and that begins to replace the trigger of that trauma of the past. And rather than fear, we can walk in calmness and peace and faith. May God bless you, and may that be your experience in life, and I want that experience more in my life. So let's just claim the fact that the Lion of Judah is for us, that greater is He that is in us than he that is in the world. Well, I hope that video was a blessing to you, and I want to thank you for visiting with us here at Living the Word today. Really would like to ask you to help us. We're trying to grow our subscriber base like everyone else. But if you like this video, hit that like button. And while you're at it, hit that subscribe button. It's usually right down there below. That would really help us. If you want to take it one step further, hit that little bell icon. That's the notification icon. Every time we have new content, it'll be delivered right to you. But I want to thank you for your encouragement. Thank you for your prayers. And if you want to know more about this ministry, please visit livingthewordtoday.com. You have a blessed day.